that, for all the talk these days of being authentic and being, your true self, that really runs afoul of what's actually going on a lot of times, because young people, and frankly, I'm Gen Xer, I think it happens to lots of generations these days. You are very wary of really, being yourself, being your authentic self. You can be your authentic self if it kind of fits within the strictures of the monoculture. Then, like, by all means, be your authentic self. But all of us have ideas that, frankly, are a little heretical. And if we let all of those out, somebody is going to be upset. And especially when you're young, that's a very difficult mental space to inhabit, because every day you're waking up and there's this Saeed, another one of our interview subjects, put it really well. He's like, there's me, and then there's the me I portray to everybody else. And there's always the conflict between the real him and the him that's online, for instance. And that's just a really miserable way to live day in and day out.
Yeah. And I mean, I just, as you were talking, it made me think about how younger people approach, their histories, essentially their online histories and things like publishing. So I've, ran a website for over 10 years. So I've edited and published the work of other women, primarily younger and older women. And the amount of young women who will send me an email, 3, 5, 7 years after they've published an article on my website and ask me to take it down, or to change their name, or to take their name off the piece. It's so many women. The older women don't ever do that to me, but the young women do. And I've been writing, for, I don't know, since not that long, like since I was about 30. So, mostly online, not in print, but I still approach publishing from like a print perspective. So I would never dream of asking a publisher to take down something that I'd written for them and that they'd publish for me, because first of all, I'm going to be accountable for what I've said. And I've changed my mind about all sorts of things. I just say, I've changed my mind about this, and now I see this differently. Or, that's not something that I would write now. But this, they totally feel entitled to, and sometimes they're very hyperbolic about their reasons why they want the article removed, or they want their names changed. It's somehow dangerous to them, but usually it's like a career change. Usually it's, I'm applying for universities, I'm applying for this program, or I'm starting to apply for jobs, and I don't want this to come up in a Google search. And then they also want to demand that I go around and scrub social media. And I used to always just have this policy of being like, I'm not unpublishing anything unless there's a legal issue. And of course, I'm not going to go around and scrub things off of social media. But, at a certain point, I was just like, okay, like, I don't want to ruin your chances of getting into a program, or like getting into this new job. And it seemed like it had become so normalized for that to happen, that online publications would take something down, either if they didn't like it, they got bad feedback, so they pull something. And I was shocked when I saw that first starting to happen, because again, like in print media, you can't do that. You just publish an editor's note the next week or whatever. But it just became so normalized that I'm like, am I the only publisher on the internet that's going to refuse to take your article down because you don't want to get in trouble? But the entitlement and the demands and the anger when I would say no, the way that they would respond when I would say no, like I was ruining their lives or endangering them in some ways. It's like, man, like, you published this, that's it. You'd like, you should be able to defend yourself, or at least you should be able to explain that you've changed their minds. And I don't think that those women did really change their minds about what they wrote even. I think they just thought it might get them in trouble.
That is so interesting and so terrifying. And I would guess that the requests weren't just kind of random, that they were certain issues and certain perspectives, or is that fair to say?
Yeah, I mean, I'm like quite well known in my advocacy for women's sex-based rights and against gender identity ideology. And so my website is associated with those ideas, but often, you know, the things that these women would have been writing about would have been connected to those ideas as well. Not always. Sometimes I think it was just the association with the website or with other authors who'd said things along those lines. But yeah, and some of them were quite rude. Some of
Really?
them would like some of them try to kind of like threaten you and like, you know, this
Wow.
is I own this and it's like my legal, and it's like, no, you don't actually. That's the
Wow.
deal, is that I published it and then now I own it. But
Wow.
you know, I don't want to get in arguments with people around this thing. I usually try to keep it simple. But
That is so fascinating, man. That's, yeah, that, I mean, that's, I see one of my big bugaboos is, you know, when people talk about cancel culture, and frankly, that plays, you know, a pretty big role in the coddling movie as well. Um, a lot of times people see it as you know, who's the celebrity in the crosshairs, or who's the poor schmo who everybody hates today. Um, and that's part of it. But the stuff that you talked about and the stuff that I encountered in my many interviews with Gen Zers, it just seems very, very obvious that that's like what we see is the tip of the iceberg, and the real activity is happening below the waterline. It's happening when, you know, nobody but you and, you know, your associates, uh, and now your listeners will know about anecdotes like that, but they're multiplied, you know, across the culture. And I've talked with other people um, who have similar encounters like that. So you know, whether it's J.K. Rowling, you know, Dave Chappelle, like who's ever the celebrity of the moment, that is just such a tip of the iceberg thing. It's you know, cancel culture isn't about Dave Chappelle. It's about
yeah.
the 17-year-old version of Dave Chappelle who's now, you know, going to clubs and trying to get stage time. And, you know, what jokes is he going to avoid? How, you know, how is he going to change his act? I, you know, have um, a Gen Z comedian friend, a one name friend. She's Indian, and her parents thought that she would just get married and take her husband's name, so they never bothered to give her a last name. But her name is Sir. Yes, so it's now a big part of her comedy routine. But she's very talented, very brave, very brash, and she's you know, and she's doing a good job in New York, and she tours. But she'll tell me that comedians her age, they, you know, you don't talk about X, Y, and Z. You know, you probably
Right.
know what those are. It's, you know, certainly it's the gender issues. And it's a lot of the other hot button issues. Um, and that's, you know, that's part of the Dave Chappelle ripple effect too. It's not, you know, is he going to be canceled from this or that special? Um, yeah, wow. I get riled up when I hear things like that that you mentioned, because it's just so much darker. And I'm trying to be optimistic, and I want to be optimistic. But when I
Sorry.
hear things like that, it's like, oh no, it really is that bad.